Report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Curtis Weeks, your GM. What you have before you today is a version of the white paper that looked at demand management and in some of the constraints, some of the concerns, some of the issues associated with the implementation of demand management relative to a variety of legal and water right related impacts, actions, situations. It's not intended to be exhaustive. It's a pretty good job. I think we do a pretty good job defining demand management. I think it's done a pretty good job laying out, I'd consider it to be a pretty good representative set of what demand management might look like. And I think the constraints are fairly, concerns and constraints and issues are fairly well laid out. If you recall, your board gave us direction to work in collaboration with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA, Marina Coast GSA, the County of Monterey, and the County Water Resource Agency. And even until this last month, as we were trying to get this process to you and through processes with other organizations, we had last minute edits. And given that it's been an effort, a collaborative effort, it's not surprising that we've had little nits to kind of correct along the way. So the version I took to the advisory committee earlier this month has been again modified. And the modifications were really aimed at trying to be clear and consistent about terms like Salinas Valley and terms like basin. So we even have offered I think it's on page 5, maybe page 6, there's a footnote that goes back to Bulletin 118 that talks about what basins mean, so that we get some consistency through the document. It's not surprising that there are small, I'll call them editorial issues associated with a paper like this, given that it was created in committee. Having said that, I still think it's a good effort. Your advisory committee recommended receiving it with the modifications that we've made. I apologize for getting it to you late, but our attorneys were working on getting stuff done as kind of hand over fist, as quickly as we could. And it got to you this afternoon. It's been posted, albeit in track changes, but the changes associated with the comments from our advisory committee are in blue, and you can see them. They're mainly in the front of the document to provide that consistency. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I think it's a good effort, and our staff recommends that you guys receive the report. Know that report, the white paper. The Salinas Valley Basin GSA also received it. I made comment that I'd ask them to receive it. Recognize that we might have some editorial comments, small ones, and those are in front of you. And if you do indeed choose to receive it, I will send it back to the Salinas Valley Basin GSA so they have a copy of it. We have one consistent paper. Excuse me. That's my report. Any questions?
Curtis, what's the aim of the white paper? Is it just to inform people of what's going on?
Thank you. I missed that critical thread. Yeah, the purpose of the paper really is to provide a really good basis of understanding about demand management and the considerations associated with it. Ultimately, demand management, by its name, is looking at to manage how much water gets extracted from a groundwater basin. And that can lead to a whole host of issues, not the least of which are water rights. You're asking people either through expenditures to be more efficient or actual cutting the amounts of water they use. So we wanted to provide some basis of information that board members could have, that the lay person could have, and kind of form a common understanding of some of those considerations throughout our public and especially with the boards. So that's really the purpose.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
Yeah, I was just curious, so some of the edits from, I think it was Kristen, were some of those implemented on that, or?
All of the edits from Kristen are shown in blue, yes.
Okay, all right, yeah. I took a quick look at
The red edits are actually the last edits that we received from the Salinas Valley Basin GSA.
Oh, okay, that's
I sent that
confusing.
comment to her. If you go and you touch upon it, it tells you who did the edits.
Oh, gosh, could we have a training session on how to use smartphones?
No.
I may need that, you know.
Again, I apologize for it being kind of messy, but in the effort to try to get it to you, that was the best we could do.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah. You do have, just if you want to, you don't have to, but if you want to, if you look at the version that was in the packet, it will have taken all those red edits and the green edits, because the green edits are about things that got moved, and give you a clean copy. So you can disregard that and then just look for the blue stuff.
If one were to print it out, how would it come out if you printed it out? Would it highlight those?
If you print it out, it will come out with all kinds of colors. It'll be beautiful.
Unless you have an old-time black and white printer.
Well, like I said,
Then you won't have to worry about it.
just for, comparison, just so you can get your brain around it. If you take the version that you have in the packet, you print that black and white, it's all good. And then you can look online at the version that Ann sent you this afternoon, and just find some of the blue edits. Like it's on page 5 or 6, I think. There's a fairly good sized block of text at the bottom. It's a footnote, talks about, basins, how it's defined in Bulletin 118. That's the stuff that's been added.
Okay.
So again, it was really aimed at clarifying basins and valley, and I think Mr. Versick, I noticed that he's attending in our audience, and Nancy Isaacson at the advisory committee, both commented they wanted to try to get some more consistency, and this was our best effort of getting that to you, that consistency.
Great.
So I got just a quick question. So this is, just for clarification, this is informational?
It is
Only?
informational. That's why I'm only asking that you receive it.
Okay,
Your action today, you can not receive it, that's fine too. But receiving it is just that we have it on file. It's been something that kind of comes to completion. And again, it's this document that will help us give all of us, our board members, the public, a general framework to talk about demand management in.
okay. And it's been reviewed to the extent that we think that we all agree that this is, do we agree on these things that are talked
Yeah,
about?
it's been looked at by all the organization's attorneys,
Okay.
and everyone's weighed in, and it's, like I say, it's a reasonably good document that serves that purpose. It is not exhaustive,
Right.
and, candidly, none of this will get shook out until it goes to court,
Very good. Thank you.
if it goes to court. For instance, it's kind of hard, you're going to be kind of hard pressed to take somebody to court if you're asking them to be more efficient in their use of water. But if you tell them you got to stop pumping above X amount, that might get some people going in a different route. Having said all that, I can't speak for the proclivities of those who pump water in and around the basin. Everybody's going to have a different opinion, and lawsuits are lawsuits. They're one way in which people seek to find closure on these items. But even that is kind of a continuum, right? Things will continue to move. But this really does do, I think, a pretty good job of identifying what demand management might look like, and then some of the considerations associated with it. So for that purpose, yeah, I would say we all kind of agree on it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, what I'd like to say about it is that I'm glad we were able to clarify some of the items that were in the white paper, because even though it's a unofficial, official piece of paper, sometimes if there's corrections aren't made, those become facts someday. The misconceptions become facts, and I'm so glad that we had different people looking at it from even in our organizations here, that cleaned it up, so that things don't get misconstrued.
Yeah, just for the board's background, know that Mary Lerner and Kristen both looked at the document while it was being prepared. So they were part and parcel to its preparation.
Any more questions or comments from board members? We'll go to public comment. I see Mr. Versick.
Thank you, Mr. Weeks, Chair, and the board. Hopefully you can hear me. My audio has some issues today. So a couple of things. One is that the document I downloaded probably about 16, 17 minutes ago when it appeared in my email, which was the updated version. As best as I can tell, that does not have the track changes, at least what was posted. I understand that can be provided at some point. But in the 5 or 6 minutes I had to look through it, I did, of course, notice the new footnote, and I noticed some other things. So I think I have a pretty good idea of what the edits were. I also noticed that the Rio Seco GSA title is no longer on the title sheet. That's probably an error, but I don't know. The prior version listed the ASGSA on the title sheet along with the rest. I don't see it in this one. But my main issue is that, notwithstanding footnote 1, is I don't, and in the 5 or 6 minutes I had to review this, I could not, in that time, pull up my current version of Bulletin 118 and turn to the correct page and look at the correct table. But my recollection is that in the current version of Bulletin 118, there is no such thing as the Salinas Valley Basin. And of course I could be wrong, but and there absolutely categorically was one in the prior version, no question about that. But the 2021, I believed, had taken the Salinas Valley Basin as an overarching basin with subbasins and turned it into simply a listing of subbasins in its chart. Again, I can't do it on the fly, but that's my recollection when I looked at that bulletin from time to time. Because the basin itself, at least in the prior version, included parts of the Paso Robles subbasin, for example. So it seems a little bit it may or may not be exactly correct. I do, of course, because Mr. Weeks has heard this before, I agree with most of his observations that this is a decent product, that it is broad, it can serve as a little bit of a primer. It's not very specific, nor was it intended to be. So I think it's a useful step along the way towards other things. So I'm not denigrating this effort or all that went into it, but I just can't quite reconcile it without going back to Bulletin 118 and making sure what I recollect, and which is what I think my comment was at other fora, whether that's consistent with the edits I see. I don't think it makes it fatal. I'm not sure. I'll look into that, and then maybe I'll provide a comment to one or another entity. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, like I said, we were trying to get you a version as quickly as we could. Admittedly, I haven't had time to really digest it and put it all together for you, so that I apologize for. And as soon as I can get one complete comment with one copy with everything completed and done, I will send it to all of you, and I will send a version to Mr. Versick as well, so that we can all clarify the issues.
So theirs had the changes because it's a Word document, but when I PDF'd it, I cleaned it up and posted it online, so
Okay.
I'm changing it right now as we speak.
Okay, so what we'll do as staff is we'll just go through it and compare it and get you a clean copy. And I'll send that same clean copy to Mr. Versick so he can answer his questions. That's only fair. I apologize for not having it all done in ample time.
Is there any more public comments?
No, Mr. Chairman.
I don't see any. So are we going to receive this tonight, or are we going to wait?
That's your call. I would recommend that you receive it pending, recognizing you're going to get a clean copy of it.
what does the rest of the board think?
What if you would do the clean copy, but there's some changes that have to take place on a few words that perhaps are out of place? Can you?
If you don't want to receive it, I can bring it back. That's not a problem.
Well, I'm just saying if you can clean it up and make a few changes, and we accept it today, is that acceptable? Or do we, if we're gonna change a few words, would it be better to wait?
Almost all these changes that we're talking about at this point are editorial and not substantive. While the document itself does have a lot of substance, the kinds of issues that we're going through right now are primarily editorial. Nevertheless, if it's the board's pleasure, it's not a problem, we'll bring it back. You do have another public comment now, I know, Mr.
Yeah,
Versick.
Mr. Versick, back to public comments.
Thank you. With the chair's indulgence, I mean, from my perspective, I agree with Mr. Weeks that if I happen to be correct or if I'm wholly incorrect, either way, it's an editing level tweak, one direction or the other direction or no direction at all. So just, that's my opinion for whatever it's worth. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Versick.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, then I'll make the motion to accept it.
You're gonna receive it subject to change,
Subject change.
and then we get the changes right.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of receiving the white paper subject to change, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, we will receive it. And then we'll move on to Riverside Groundwater Sustainability Agency General Manager's Status Report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we still have Form 700 compliance to work through. The Fair Political Practices Commission continues to highlight to me that we've got some folks still that need to submit the paperwork. If you need a different email for them to communicate with you around, let me know. I gave you the one that I had that we use to communicate with. If you need a different email for me to send to you, then please let me know. Because I seem to be the, the switchboard. It comes to me and I got to get it to you. So I'll just give you a heads up. I think they're due, correct me if I'm wrong,
April 1st, I think.
council on the 1st of April.
1st April.
1st of April. So we've still got plenty of time, a week. But it's not too painful. And it gets you can file it right online. So, you just go through it and send it.
So I have a question. So I had mine sent in electronically. Everyone knows, I had my office manager do it, and she sent it in, and then I've gotten a couple emails from them saying, "Hey, where's your thing at?" So now I'm kind of, I don't have an acknowledgement that it was accepted, but my office manager said she sent it.
Have you, you've gotten requests for it to be sent after you submitted it? I'll check.
Okay, because we'll figure out another way
Yeah.
to do it then, and I'm not sure, I generally just use my own email, and so I rarely check with the Greenfield site, so maybe that's the glitch, or maybe they're sending an acknowledgement there, I don't know.
Yeah, there are a couple of process pieces when you're filling it out that you have to pay attention to. You have to make sure you go through each of the various forms and say whether you're using it or not, and ask some subsequent questions, and you need to pay attention to those. If you submit it without them, I don't know that it'll let you submit though. So I'll check. I'll see if you're on that list.
If you're on more than one board, you need to check all the ones that you're on. And that may be, so they may
Well,
have 3 out of the
Thank God
4.
I'm only on one.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
never mind.
Although you're telling me I could be on more, and it's just, that way I can just use
It's
that
really-
document on
Totally,
everything.
it's so much easier when you're on multiple
I was
boards.
trying to talk you into that before the meeting started.
Yeah, but I got a board for you.
I think mine got sent in. I'll have to check with my daughter.
Yeah, I'll be reaching out this week just to nudge all of you to make sure we get them done.
Just make out a naughty or nice list, and we'll go from there.
It's just a good thing to get done. And, the FPPC has now stepped up its process to make sure that all the GSAs are complying with these acts that other boards are. I mean, we are, 8 years into being around since 2017, so it's about time. About time we get them done. There are, a whole lot of other issues that are going around in our basins. Notably, there are some fairly good presentations that have occurred at some of the other implementation subcommittees, notably the East Side and the Pressure implementation subcommittees, have had some modeling results that have been presented that appear to show a real struggle with making demand management a meaningful way in which to stop seawater intrusion. Here's what I mean by that. If we're in the Central Valley, for instance, if we're over in San Joaquin, if we stop pumping an acre foot of water, it stays in the ground. So there's a meaningful change in the amount of groundwater through demand management. By applying demand management in the seawater intruded area, you still have a whole bunch of seawater intruded water, groundwater, and you still have a really deep trench, a groundwater trench underneath Salinas that's pulling seawater in. So even though we stop pumping to 30% was the modeling, you don't get a 1-for-1 with the seawater intrusion. And it gets pretty complicated because as you stop pumping, you still have this mix of salt water and fresh water that once they're mixed, they're very difficult to clean up. So you actually have to have a pretty big mound of water on the land side, elevation-wise, to push that seawater intruded water back out. And that will take decades. So if you think about the chemistry and the physics of seawater intrusion versus just an overdrafted basin, far more complicated using demand management to address seawater intrusion. Okay, I tell you that story to tell you the real story. So the implication is that we really need to be focused on developing some sort of projects in the seawater intruded area and the east side to be successful in meeting the mandates of SIGMA. And that means they're going to be expensive projects. So most of the things that we're talking about are in the hundreds of millions of dollars to $1 billion range. So they're pretty expensive projects. I'll use the groundwater extraction. I know they have a different name for it. But that project, appears to have some real efficacy, but it's really expensive. They've looked at aquifer storage and recovery. That doesn't seem to be quite as effective. So there's some push from interest in, especially the pressure zone, at looking at other projects that might include developing some sort of well field in and around the confluence of the Arroyo Seco River and the Salinas River, and piping water north or to the east. So I would say over the next, year and a half, some of these things will need to be worked out and developed to such a degree that we can have some meaningful discussion. The only one that has gotten really that far enough along to have a discussion about is the groundwater extraction project. And it's kind of unique in that we take seawater intruded, brackish water out of the groundwater basin, clean it up and supply it to the cities. The real benefit in terms of supplying water to Salinas is it starts impacting that real negative groundwater elevation we're seeing under Salinas. So that has some double benefits in terms of pulling seawater and seawater intruded water, brackish water, towards the ocean and stopping and allowing the groundwater to rise on the east side. The challenge with the east side is it's a very slow process because of the geology. It's tight soils, a lot of clay, takes a long time. Nevertheless, that's one that has, at least we have an idea, right? The Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project, when we do the modeling, we find that there's really not that much water available when we would need it. Taking water either off the river or when we have it in excess in the reservoirs kind of limits the amount of real water that we have. So it's maybe not enough water to be effective. So, those two projects have been at least developed to such a degree that we can have an analysis of how effective they are. We don't know about other ones, so stay tuned. So I'll pause. I have one more item, but I'll pause, see if there's any questions about projects. Not yet?
Any questions?
Okay, last issue is, we're getting ready to gear up to get into our first round of 5-year updates on our groundwater sustainability plan. That'll start to ramp up later part of this year and all of next year, so be prepared. We'll be doing, a little bit more technical work. Gus and I will be engaged a little bit more in the coming fiscal year. And we do have a coordination committee meeting the first week in April, and that'll be one of the topics we'll talk about. At least, broad strokes, big picture. But it is that time. 5 years just rips by, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's only been 2, I thought, but.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Any public comments on the Groundwater Sustainability Agency Manager's Report?
Mr. Versick has his
Mr.
hand up.
Bursick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to add a few, at the moment, I'm going to just call them personal observations in addition to what your general manager briefed you on. And one is, although it was not stressed at the event where the 30% demand reduction modeling was presented, it certainly appeared to me that that would raise groundwater levels in a number of places and in some material ways in the critically overdrafted basin. So what I think will be needed, and I think your general manager said the same thing, is a combination of approaches. I mean, I just think that's where it will all go one way or the other. And I personally absolutely categorically expect DWR, or if things go awry, the state board, will require demand management in the critically overdrafted basin, because they have everywhere else where you've had similar kinds of circumstances. That's less relevant to this GSA, obviously, because you're nowhere near those areas. But it's part of the coordination you will be having to some level or another with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA. So I just thought I'd offer my opinions to it, in addition to what Mr. Weeks has, in my view, accurately, thoroughly briefed you on.
Thank you, Mr. Versick.
I don't see any more public comments. Any board questions or comments? No? Okay, we receive and file. And being no further business, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Raoul?
You know what it's been? It has been 8 years.
8 years, what?
Since we started
Has it?
this. 2017. And I remember when we. It's not something.
He also thinks it's like a 2.
I'll have to talk to Curtis about not spooking the cattle. I wonder if he knows what that term means. Well, you know,